The Immigration Rundown with Giovanni Diaz.
Thanks so much for joining us for the Immigration Rundown. I'm your host, Giovanni Diaz. And immigration has always been at the center of the national discourse, but it feels like it gets even more so as the months go by. We understand that the Trump administration has unveiled several initiatives to enhance immigration enforcement all across the country. And now topics like TPS, asylum seeking, refugee, which seem unusual for those who are outside of the immigrant community. They are so mainstream now, and we see immigration headlines all the time, all across legacy media, and more people are talking about it. So to help you understand more of those topics and understand exactly how that impacts your life on a daily basis, we are going to make sense of that with the help of those who are involved with the immigrant community. So last November of 2025, we followed the case of ICE operations happening in downtown Manhattan. In the area near Chinatown, protesters that were there at the time were arrested, and also several other people were detained. Immigrants who were in the United States were taken into ICE custody. One of those folks who was detained by ICE was Mr. Abdul Tal. He was on Canal Street when he was taken into custody. He spent about a month at the detention center in Brooklyn until he was released on Christmas Eve. And that release of Mr. Tal happened after a judge ruled that his arrest was unlawful. And there was a lot of community support involving this case, and the initiative to get this man out of ICE custody was pushed by two organizations, and one of them was the Amadou Ly Foundation that helped filing a habeas corpus to get him out of ICE custody. So in order for us to understand exactly how this whole thing played out, I have here Mr. Amadou Ly from the Amadou Ly Foundation. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us and join us for this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
So how is Mr. Tal doing?
He's doing well. He's happy to be back with his friends. He's happy to be back with his loved ones, and then he's happy to be doing a part-time job. Yeah.
You and I have been talking since last year when this whole thing unfolded. Walk us through the process of filing the habeas corpus and all the community support that went into it.
Yeah. I've received the call as soon as that happened. They call our foundation the Amadou Ly Foundation, and the first thing I did, I started asking what was the process of his arrest, the details. Was he previously arrested? What took place? Did they violated his law? Was he beaten? His rights, was he beaten? And then after I took all those information, I started to put it together, and then I contacted a fellow organizer as well, and we worked on this habeas and made sure that it represented exactly what took place, and send it in, because the reason why that was very important and it was necessary for us to do it at a timely to do it as soon as possible was to prevent his transfer to other states.
How long did that take between you learning about his case and filing the habeas corpus and starting that process effectively?
With him, I believe it took about 5 hours. I was writing that habeas, I believe, until 12 a.m.
So, and he was detained on November 22nd, is that right?
Yes.
So that same day you started the process right away?
Yes. Yeah. We started that process that same day because, it was a matter of, again, him being transferred as soon as possible. And they actually wanted to transfer him a couple of days later. So my instinct was actually right. Yeah.
Well, and you mentioned that he detained before? Was he arrested before? What is his background? Explain to us what were the grounds of his arrest or of his detention.
Yeah, so Mr. Tal is an asylum seeker from Senegal, right? So who came through the border. He was being persecuted for not following the popular religion in Senegal, which is Islam. So coming in here, he was paroled into the country, and as a way to make a living, he's been looking for a job, trying to make a living. Actually, he's been looking for a job, trying to make a living, and it pretty much what took place with him is he was at Canal Street at the wrong place at the wrong time. He was previously detained, but all those cases were actually dismissed. One thing that is important to note is that at Canal Street, there are many people who are there who aren't vendors. Some are vendors. Others are there maybe to hang out with their friends. Others are there to shop. Therefore, it is important to note that whenever ICE comes to Canal Street, they round up whoever they can get their hands on and then take them in.
Do you think that's one of the reasons why his arrest, his detention was considered unlawful?
Yeah, absolutely. I think his arrest was considered unlawful. It was more of a revenge actually coming from ICE because according to them or the statement that they released afterwards, they actually told the NYPD to hold on to Mr. Tal, and the NYPD didn't cooperate, which we are happy that they didn't. Now, this was sort of a revenge, and they came to Canal Street specifically according to ICE. It was a targeted arrest.
One of the things that struck me when I was covering this case from the first hearing when I met you, and then from on the day that he was actually effectively released from the detention center, was the community support. There were so many people there waiting for Mr. Tal to be released. What are you hearing from your community, and how do you see that community support that clearly you've been receiving?
You know, it is important to lift the spirit of hope, right? I think part of this battle that we're facing, half of it is faith, the other half of it is making sure that faith replaces fear, right? So, and hope, right? And I think that's what this Mr. Tal represented within the community, right? Him being released while so many people are afraid of ICE. They're literally afraid to get out of their homes. And him being released represented hope, right? It represented having faith. It represented knowing that there's still hope within this there's still hope within the democratic system, within democracy. So that's what he represented. And him coming back to the community and seeing his friends and being able to grab a coffee, you know what I mean? Being able to do what New Yorkers, do the best, watch the Super Bowl, enjoy the American way of the ways that Americans do things. It's beautiful. Yeah. And it gave hope to many people.
And I saw that he was quite emotional when he came out of the detention center. I mean, he and I couldn't really communicate because I couldn't speak his language, but I had you translate and explain to me exactly what was going through his mind. But I just wanted you to kind of go back and tell me exactly the words that he said to him, obviously, as much as you can. But do you remember exactly what he told you when he got out?
Yeah, he at first, he couldn't believe it. There are so many people inside of those detention centers, so many parents, and he described them mostly crying at night because they don't know the future of their children. And him, when the judge told him that he was going to get released, many people stood up and clapped for him, right? Because again, it's hope. He represents hope, right? And when he got out, he said, I was losing hope in there. I thought I was not going to get out. I thought that, here I am, and I was going to be deported out of country where the moment I set my foot in there, my life is at risk. And so that's why he was very emotional. That's why he was crying. And also to see that how much we care about him, although it's just a community of friends or people. Like, I've never met him before, but that's what makes this story a really beautiful one, because I don't have to know you. You don't have to look like me, for me to have to fight for you. That's what makes America a beautiful country.
And what is next for him right now?
He's actually waiting to see a judge, and we are very hopeful for his case. We have amazing attorneys that are fighting for him, and so we're hoping that everything will go well.
You and I were speaking off camera earlier, and you said that there is a lot of fear within the community. You just kind of double down on that a little bit just now. And I understand that a lot of folks who are here and that you know from within your community, they're asylum seekers, right? What are you hearing from them as we see and we hear more and more about the fight that and the challenges that asylum seekers are going through right now?
A lot of them are scared right now because as we're dealing with an administration that is trying to deport them to third world countries, to Uganda, to countries that aren't stable themselves, countries that will literally persecute them for the same reason that they ran away from their original country. Therefore, it is we're dealing with a community that is very sensitive and vulnerable, which is why right now our foundation we're working on making sure that these guys are off the streets. Like right now, we have a program where it's called From Street Vendors to Barbers, where we actually help train them, right? So they're no longer doing street vending, right? And at the same time, you have another program called 800 Habeas, where we are actually, whoever gets apprehended by ICE and is unlawful, our goal is to make sure that we give a federal judge a chance to rule on that, you know. So that's our response right now is we're working towards solutions, or at least temporary solutions.
I wanted to read this for you because it's some new data that we just obtained not long ago that shows from the Department of Homeland Security that shows that 8 in every 10 asylum seekers are being denied of their claims across immigration courts in the country. That study was released by the Visa HQ and follows analysis of several different cases across the United States. The researchers, what they do is basically compile those asylum petitions nationally. And what the explanation is for this is that there are faster timelines going on and tougher standards in place right now that were put in place over the last year by the Trump administration. What the Trump administration says is that this is in hopes to move cases more quickly. But what advocates are saying, and I would like for you to kind of weigh in on this as well, is that this speed up process is kind of limiting due process for people seeking protection in the United States. A lot of people who are trying to come here, whether through the border or even coming here overstaying their visa, they're having their cases denied because of the new rules that have been put in place. What do you make of this?
I mean, that's a fact. The fact that many arrests, as soon as anyone gets arrested, especially in a lot of democratic states, they transfer them to other states, right? Where those judges are less lenient. Those judges are less likely to grant asylums. You know what I mean? So, and also, if you look at what's been happening in different courts all over the country, a lot of these guys are actually being apprehended when they go to court. And what that does is that they no longer have time to work on their evidence. You know, they no longer have time to maybe seek counsel. All of these are tactics that aren't really respecting due process. I believe that it is important to remind ourselves that this country, what makes this country different is the fact that we allow due process to take place. And I believe 9 out of 10, I mean, it's not surprising given that so many judges are being fired, right? I think we have this administration truly weaponize what should be fair and balanced due process to something that is more political. We have seen many, militaries who are now judges, right? And we have seen many judges that actually would look at asylum cases and analyze what's being put right in front of them and make fair assessments being fired. So I believe that we should really look at the INA again and actually understand that a president shouldn't have that power to have to fire judges, because what we're seeing right now is a perfect example of that.
You're watching the Immigration Rundown with Giovanni Diaz. You're watching the Immigration Rundown with Giovanni Diaz.
I understand that you also have a very personal connection with this matter because of your upbringing. You yourself almost faced deportation.
Yeah.
Walk us through that, because your story is just so interesting.
Thank you. I came to the U.S. in 2001. I was 13. And then at 14, I started living by myself. And then at 16, I started facing deportation. And at 18, I participated in this robotic competition called FIRST in New York while representing Harlem. And we won the New York City Regional Robotic Championship. And from there, my story made the front page of the New York Times and Congress, from Senator Chuck Schumer to Ted Kennedy to President Bush, and a lot of those, I call them the OGs. They stood up, and then and Charles Rangel, who actually presented a bill on my behalf in Congress, and they stood up for me. They stood up, and that's how I was able to stay in this country, which is why I believe that it is my duty now to actually fight for those who deserve and who belong here to also stay.
Mm-hmm. And you basically changed your entire life just for that purpose,
Yeah.
just to fight for immigration rights.
Yeah.
Explain to us why.
You know, from then on, I moved to California, and I was going back and forth in New York and California, working as an actor. And but it is important, again, when I'm 80, I want to look back and say that I actually lived a meaningful life by changing the lives of others. So it was hurting me while I was in California looking at what's happening in New York. You know, so many migrants, so many people asking questions, so many of them seeking jobs. I remember walking down at an avenue where it was flooded with immigrants, and many of them had questions, you know. And when I knew the president was I knew the president was coming in. And what I started to do was I started to make videos telling many people, go to sanctuary cities because it's not going to be friendly. And that's what sort of blew things up, because those videos went viral. And then there were others. Many people asking questions. Okay, what do we do? Okay, how do we get jobs? Okay, how do we get food? You know, how do we get legal representation? And it just didn't sit right, having to be over there walking at red carpets when I know deep inside I can be useful to some folks. Mm-hmm. So I had to switch that up. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And as we continue to understand better and more of what the Trump administration has in terms of plans for the immigrant community, what is your message and what is your hope for the future?
I believe that it is important that activists and organizers utilize the power of habeas, because especially in democratic states, it is important that when we file habeas petitions, we're taking the power away from the Trump administration and moving it towards federal judges, right? So in cases like Abdul Tal, or there's been other cases, 2 weeks ago we freed a father of two and a husband who actually had an ankle monitor and was told, come to ICE and we're going to remove it. The moment he got there, they actually took him in, arrested him. In cases like that, we filed a habeas petition challenging that arrest, and then we actually won, right? We secured his release. Therefore, I believe that many states and many organizers should start utilizing the power of habeas, but also support local organizations. Like here we are, Amadou Lee Foundation, we've never really received any funding from local, states, or federal funding. Everything we're doing, because I said we're just not going to stop just because there's no funding. We need all hands on deck. And sometimes maybe your job is not to do habeas. Maybe your job is not to protest. Maybe it's your job to support a local organization. Maybe it is your job to protest. But we need all hands on deck, because I've heard so many people tell us, well, I wouldn't believe what I would have done if slavery was happening. Well, what we're dealing with right now, I believe it is also important, and I believe that everyone should actually chip in.
Thank you so much, Amadou Lee from the Amadou Lee Foundation. I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you so much for your time. I'll see you next time for the Immigration Rundown.
The Immigration Rundown with Giovanni Diaz.